So, I think before I went and talked to Trudy, I was going to tell you about Jack's most famous achievement, which is his killing of a German non-commissioned officer with a longbow. Basically, he shot the guy with a longbow. And as the story goes, they were Germans hold up really late at night, I believe. It was pretty dark, so probably not a lot of warning for anybody involved. But in a split second, this guy suddenly has arrow fletching sticking out of his chest. And then all of Jack's friends, actually his subordinates, because he was the officer there, his subordinates lit the rest of the guys up that were around him with gunfire. So, I mean, it is really cool that he killed the guy with the arrow, but not as much of a feat, because if he had not, I mean, they would have just shot him anyway. So, that happens. He did receive a Distinguished Service Award for capturing 42 German prisoners in the middle of the night. And the only guy with him who aided in the capture of these 42 German soldiers was a corporal, which, for those of you that don't know, a corporal is just one rank above private first class in the British Army, and the private first class equivalent in the American military would be a lance corporal, I believe. Give me a second. Yes, it is a lance corporal. Yeah, check my notes on that. So, he captured these guys, these 42 Germans, in the middle of the night, he came up upon some sentries who obviously weren't paying very good attention, and spotted them because one of them was smoking a cigarette, so that made it a hell of a lot easier to pick them out of the crowd, or out of the darkness. So he takes out this sentry. He gives one of the sentries, there's two of them, two at a sentry, two at a post. So he gives one of them to the corporal, and the other one, he puts his gun to the guy, and he says, well, he takes him to give me a sec. So I guess I'll use this. He's got these guys, he takes them. That doesn't seem right. Anyway. Look at the thing's face. Okay, he captures these guys, and they go around sentry to sentry, and using the captured sentry, who is held at gunpoint, they lure the guys into a false sense of security before revealing the man standing behind the German with a large broadsword and a pistol to his back. So, that being Mad Jack. Simplified. Goodness. So, like that, in that way, he captured 42 soldiers. And the interesting thing that he did that most people would probably never do was he made the Germans carry their own rifles back. He took the bolts out of the Germans' rifles and then had them carry them. He also made the Germans carry all of their explosives and ammunition, saying that it weighed them down and made it easier for him to control them. And this whole ordeal, although a little bit fantastic, he remarked himself that it was a bit Errol Flynnish, simply because of the circumstances of that capture and just how poetically that whole deal played out. Oh, what did we learn about today? Well, we learned about Wojtek, the bear. So I guess that's, do we not have strength? Is that another thing? Oh, right, strength is the other kind. So that probably, he carried artillery, so that's explosives. And we're learning about Mad Jack, who does a lot of sneaking. We can also learn quickly, I guess, because we're learning. Why not? I can make up whatever reason I want. You can't tell me what to do. So, captures these guys, 42 soldiers, and that was kind of the pinnacle of Mad Jack's military career. So, but unfortunately for him and a unit of his commandos, they were eventually captured by the Germans. So, having been captured, I am clearly... be careful. Sure. I don't really want to talk. Okay. So, I kind of forgot where I was. Oh, right, Mad Jack's capture. So he was captured by the Germans, sent to a camp. Initially, he was at a work camp, and early on, it was ordered by, order came down from Hitler that all the commandos were to be turned over to the Gestapo, where they would be, most likely they would have been tortured and executed. However, Churchill's life was saved by a German captain named Thweiner, who said, "You are a soldier, as am I, and I refuse to allow these civilian butchers to deal with you. I shall say nothing of having received this order," that being the order from Hitler. So, essentially, he was ordered to turn Churchill and his commandos over to the Gestapo, and he basically just ignored that order, and obviously, he didn't turn them over. Otherwise, Mad Jack wouldn't have survived the war. So, he made an attempt to escape by crawling under a fence with a British Royal Air Force officer, and they attempted to make their way to the coast where they planned to escape. However, they were captured actually just a few miles from the coast, so they did actually escape the work camp they were in, but they didn't make it far enough to get back to Allied troops. So they moved him to Berlin, where he actually flew in a Luftwaffe aircraft, and it was rumored that he set the thing on fire, doing that by putting a match on top of some papers as he left the plane, and then rather casually or innocently remarking to interrogation that one of the German officers had been smoking a cigarette and reading the newspaper. So obviously pinning that on him rather than being a man and just saying, yes, I burned that Luftwaffe aircraft that was transporting me to Berlin. But I digress. Mad Jack was a hell of a lot more man than I've ever proved to be, so there's that. The second attempt he made to escape was from a camp in Austria after he had gone to Berlin. He moved some light, well, the power failed and the lights at the work camp went out, so he just walked away while there were nobody to see him doing that. And he was eventually picked up by an American convoy who initially didn't believe that he was a British officer. But he did eventually convince them, and they took him along for the ride while they their way back. He did become, with the end of the European... What is the word I'm looking for? I am blanking really hard. With the end of the European conflict of World War II, he was going to be moved to the Japanese front. However, before he did, the Americans dropped the atom bomb, and that essentially ended the war. Although he did later serve in Palestine, where he had several notable feats, some of which were just so outlandish that people stopped shooting at him. For example, in full dress uniform, that being his kilt, rather shiny garb, and a large cane, he waltzed into the middle of the battle, and nobody shot at him just because nobody could really believe what was happening. So I guess the guy dressed as a bona fide circus clown doesn't get shot at. But he did make several attempts to save the people there, and perhaps due to his outlandish appearance, they turned down his help, and about 70 people ended up dying in Palestine. 70 Israelis in that battle. So he retired from the military in 1959, and he died in 1996. So for those of you who are 18 and over, whoever may care, you were still alive when Mad Jack was breathing his last. And I feel I really haven't done justice to the story of Mad Jack, but that's kind of all I have to say about him. Honestly, I'm disappointed in my presentation of this, because the story, Mad Jack's stories, are really rather comical and entertaining, but I just haven't presented them very well. But you do know a little bit more about him, a little bit of the facts and figures, and probably enough to say that you know who he is if anybody if your history teacher were to ask, which they most wouldn't. Very few history classes go over World War II in depth anymore, but alas, you've been learned. So that's it for episode 1 of Historical Accuracy. Thanks for sticking around this long. Be sure to like or comment on our video and submit your ideas for a Historical Accuracy episode.